real strategy. And this is a continuation of what we have discussed last week. And if you remember, and if you were in this webinar, we discussed the covered call strategy, which of course is an options strategy, which is applicable if you own at least 100 shares of an optional stock. Because if you do so, you could consider selling some call option or selling a call option to collect a premium. And typically you would sell out of the money. And how this can work, we also reviewed last week using the example of Cintas. In fact, that's the stock I have in my portfolio myself. And I indeed sold some calls, Cintas calls, with an expiration date of August 21st and a strike price of 210, which coincides more or less with the entry price where I bought Cintas. Of course, I thought Cintas is going to continue its uptrend and then had a bigger drawdown. You can see it here, but it recovered back to my entry point. And when prices were close to my original entry price where I bought the stock, I decided to sell some 210 calls with an expiration at the time of August 21st. So then prices subsequently went up and now down again. And my calls, the premium of these calls lost about 50 or approximately 50% of its value. And I decided, okay, actually I'm going to do something at that point. And this is still the covered call strategy. I decided to close out those covered calls and to roll them to a later expiration date. I kept my strike price at 210, but my expiration date now is November 15, I believe, something around November. So that was the expiration date I took. So I rolled those calls further out with the objective to collect additional premiums. And this is what you can do if you own the stock. And of course, the risk is, if you sell calls, if the stock trades above your strike price, you will be called away. You basically have to sell your shares for the strike price of 210 in this case. This is always the risk of the covered call strategy. But the idea is you don't get called away. And you keep collecting these premiums. So basically, you benefit from owning the stock. This is how the covered call strategy works. But of course, the precondition was we need to own the stock first. But you may ask yourself the question, hey, what if I don't own the stock? What if I don't have 100 shares of Cintas or some other stock where I want to use the covered call strategy on? What do I do in this case? And I believe the answer is quite simple. Yeah, well, you have to buy at least 100 shares of the underlying stock. That's the precondition. Remember, this doesn't change. We have to do this step. We have to buy these 100 shares. Sounds like a super simple solution, but guess what? There are different ways to do this. And of course, the easiest way would be to simply buy the shares outright. But let's go through some other scenarios as well. And for this, we're going to use the example of Apple. I liked the Apple setup quite a bit. We discussed it on Saturday in our scanning session. Apple has an interesting setup. I want to discuss this first with you. So what do we see here in Apple? Well, Apple got to all-time highs about 2 weeks ago, or let's say 1 week ago. But then they had earnings last week and prices dropped down quite a bit. We have this little earnings gap here. But of course, as you can see, this is still a very bullish stock. Bullish for many years. Apple has been bullish, going up and up and up. And the idea was, okay, I anticipate that Apple will close this gap, this down gap here in the next weeks or months. In the medium term, Apple will close this gap. And we thought, okay, maybe it's a good candidate potentially for a covered call strategy. I don't own any Apple stocks. So Apple was not in my portfolio. It's not there. So what can I do to use the covered call strategy here? Because the covered call strategy would basically require us to buy Apple stocks. And in this case, once I own the stock, I probably would sell my calls at around 330 around here, close to the gap fill. Because that's the idea here. This gap here, from here to here. In fact, let me show you this on our dashboard here. Let me go to Apple. There we go. Apple. All right, let me open this up. This gap here, I anticipate to get filled over time. I'm talking about this gap here, this earnings gap. So this part here. You can see the upper end of this gap is around 330. Well, 332 technically, but let's just use a round number here, 330. So my idea is we're going to close this gap. And I want to use a covered call strategy to trade this setup, basically. So, but I don't own any Apple stocks. That's my well, in quotes, problem. But what can I do? So let me go back to my slides real quick, because I basically can do three things right now. First, I could buy Apple stocks, 100 stocks at least, if I want to use this strategy. And afterwards, once I own the stock, I can sell my calls with, in this case, a strike price of 330. That's the idea, where prices may come up to the close the gap. Maybe then we're going to see a bit of a bounce, but that's the idea. That's option number one. Option number two is I could use what we call a combo order, where I submit both the purchase of the stocks, for these 100 shares, and the short call order in one combo order. Oftentimes it's beneficial. It might give you even more control as how much you actually want to pay for this combination order. We'll see in a second how that works. Or, and this is really the main topic of today, I could use something what's called a cash secured put, which is basically selling a put option. How this works, we're going to go through it step by step. So let's start with the easiest case first, the individual order. So what I could do, using my broker, we here use interactive brokers, but it doesn't really matter what that broker is. I could place two individual orders sequentially. Order number one is I'm going to submit an order to buy 100 shares of Apple. Let's see, with a share price of 306. This is where the market prices were when I prepared this slide. So 100 shares of Apple would cost me $30,600, basically, for the entire investment for the shares. Okay. Once this is done, once I got my fill for my Apple purchase of these 100 shares, I can then go ahead and sell my call option. Okay. In this case, we could pick, for example, the September 18 call at a strike price of 330. Why 330? Real quick, one more time, back to my chart here. 330 is around this gap fill area. So if we were to fill this gap, prices would need to come up to around 330. This is how I pick my strike price at a technical level, which I consider relevant. This is how I like to structure my trades. Always, it needs to make sense technically on the chart. So here my thesis is this gap fill will happen. For this price would need to come up to at least 330. Okay. So I'm selling my call September 18, strike price 330, and I collect a premium of $390 for this. So effectively, basically what that means is, when this all goes through, is that I bought Apple for a combined price of $302.10 per share. And if you, once again, make the math here, this would cost me $30,210. Because it's for 100 shares. So you multiply this number by 100. This is how you get it. And you can already see what the benefit of this covered call strategy is, because you kind of, reducing your share price a little bit by the premium you are collecting for the short call. So the effective price for this purchase is $302 as opposed to $306 per share. This is with individual orders. But what typically works better is if you don't submit these orders individually, but you use a combined order. I'm going to show you how this can be done with interactive brokers. And even if you use a different platform, maybe a Thinkorswim, you should be able to do the same thing as one combo order. How does this work? So here's the combo order. Basically, we would simultaneously buy 100 shares of Apple and at the same time sell the call at a strike price of 330 at a combined limit price. Let me show you how this works. I'm going to go over to my interactive brokers platform. And of course, it might look a bit different on your end. But what you would do in interactive brokers is you would go to a tool in there called the option trader. It's this one here, where you can pull up Apple. You can see Apple is pulled up here, and you can see different option chains of Apple for the different expirations: August 5th, August 7th, August 21st. These are the monthly expirations, or September 18th. That's the one we're going to use here. So, okay, so how could we structure this trade as one order in interactive brokers? So the way this works is you would go to your strategy builder, and once again, on different platforms that may look a bit differently, but here you would go to the strategy builder and first select add stock. Basically, once you do this, and the strategy builder already knows, hey, I'm looking for something like a covered call strategy. It also tells me here, I'm going to use 100 shares of Apple. Yeah. It's already added here because that's basically one option contract is always for 100 shares. So the strategy builder is smart enough to know this. So I'm going to buy 100 shares of Apple, and it is assumed this is a purchase at the current market price. If you would make this purchase at the limit price below market, this will not work. So that's we have to use a different strategy for this. We're going to get to this when we talk about cash secured puts. But if you're okay with buying a stock more or less at the market, this is what you could use. Oh, and then you're going to add another leg to this to make this a true combo order. You're going to go here to add leg. And here you're going to say, I'm going to sell. I'm going to sell one call. This is where the option part comes in. In this case, we're going to pick our September 18 call. Okay. It's going to be with a strike price of 330. Remember, that was our call for this Apple trade. Why 330? One more time. It's this price level here. Okay. So I'm going to sell this call. It's going to be a sold call. And once done, Interactive Brokers will tell me, okay, right now, if you were to place this trade, you can see the once this recalculates, the ask price for this whole trade would be around $303. First combined order, the mid price 303.45, and the bid price at 303. A bit lower, 38, very close together. The spread, of course, in Apple is very close. It's a very highly liquid stock. And you can see this is somewhat similar to what we actually calculated here with our individual order at 302.10. It's a bit higher, but of course, this is because the price of Apple has increased since. So this it's no longer at $306 per share. In fact, if you look at the Apple price right now, just real quick, where are we? We are now at 300, well, a bit higher, 306.47. This is why now this overall purchase has become a bit higher. But this basically would allow you to submit this trade long stock plus a short call in one order. You can even pick the price at which you want to get filled. So maybe this is too expensive for you. Maybe you're going to go down to, hey, I want to pay at least $302 for the entire thing. So this will allow you basically to give your own limit price, $302, and you can click on submit. Then this will then stay in as a pending order, and only once you are guaranteed this combined price for the 100 shares of Apple and the short call, you will get your fill in both legs. That's the beauty of this combination order, the combo order. Okay, so that's our way number 2, how we can execute this covered call. But there's one more way. Remember, I mentioned it before. What if you consider the current price of Apple a bit too expensive? You don't really want to buy your shares at $306. Maybe you want to only get in at 300 as a strike price. Well, then you are interested in potentially buying the Apple shares. Well, then this combo order of buying the shares and selling the covered call doesn't really apply, because you can't really place such a limit entry here for the first leg. That's not possible. But what you could do is you could consider something called a cash secured put. What is that? What is a cash secured put? Well, here we're going to change pace a little bit. We're no longer selling a call. For a cash secured put, what you want to do is you want to sell a put option, typically out of the money, and collect a premium for this put option. So in this case, what we could do, I'm going to show you in a second how this works. We could sell a put option with a strike price of $300 and collect a premium of around $8.05 per share. Since this is always 100 shares, it would be $805 for the entire put option. And if you go back to our option trader here, and we look at our option chain, I'm going to pull up our, actually, I'm going to clear these, clear all X. We're going to go now down to our option chain here for September 18 and look up the 300 strike prices one here. And we go over to the put column here. We can see right now, if we were to sell a put, short put, yeah, we would collect a premium of $720 or $7.20 per share. So it went down a little bit from the time when I created the slide. When I created these slides, the price was $8.04, so it went down a little bit because the Apple price went up. That makes sense. Okay, ideally, what you want to do then is, so let's say you place this trade, you will collect this premium right away. And ideally, you want to select a strike price near a key technical level. So if you go back to Apple one more time, we could have identified the 300 level. It's also psychologically important number as a key technical level. Let's say it is. So that's ideally what it is. For an expiration, typically 30 to 45 days out. In this case, we picked the September 18 expiration. So this is around 40 days out from now. And this works best if you find a stocks with an elevated heat index. If you remember the heat index in our dashboard, the heat index is basically an indication of how expensive or how cheap option prices are. In this case, for Apple, it's 3.26. It's not too high in this case. So this would be something perhaps against this this strategy here for Apple because it's fairly low. So, it basically tells you how much premium would you collect for options which are 30 days out at the money right now. In this case, it's 3.26%. It's not too much. A high heat index probably would be something around 10%. So if you go here to the heat index, you see, for example, USAR and the rare earths, heat index of 12.21%, much more premium, or RDDT, heat index of 8.26 and so forth. So 3 point something for Apple. It's not the highest, but I still like the Apple trade because it's, such a bullish stock. It's a Max 7 stock. So even if I get assigned, I believe in the long term, the Apple stock is going to rise and, make this a profitable trade. So this is why I'm okay with having a bit of a lower heat index for Apple. Okay. So, well, let's move on. So we're selling this cash secured put. What can happen next? Well, scenario one, and this is really what we're looking for, the stock price rises. If Apple stock goes up, my short put will lose its premium value. There's time decay also involved. And I could then considering buying back this short put when the premiums have lost 50 to 75% of the premium. Once I buy it back for a lower price than I sold it for, I'll make a nice profit and I'm flat again. The position is closed and potentially I'm ready to sell another put again. I'm going to get to this a bit later. So that's really the ideal scenario. We want the price to go up. I get to keep most of my premium. I'm flat again. I can use the same strategy again. Rinse and repeat, basically. Scenario number two is the one where it's not so favorable. The Apple price or the stock price falls down. As a result, my short put will gain value, which is not good for us because we were shorting this option. So if this gains value, price goes up. That's not ideal for a short position. So what we then could do in this unfavorable case, we could potentially close down the position if the premium jumped up by 100%, giving us a 100% loss for that premium. We can buy it back at that point. Okay, that's a possibility. But what I typically would like to do, especially with a stock like Apple, which we have a very bullish long-term outlook, I will not buy back the short put. Instead, I will let the option expire. I'm going to let my short put expire. As a result, I will be assigned this stock at the price, share price, the strike price, which is $300 in this case. So I'm forced to buy or obligated to buy 100 shares of Apple at the strike price of $300. So $30,000 total investment. So even if the price is below this, I still have to honor this strike price. But then something else will happen. All of a sudden, I am owning the stock. So I now have these 100 shares of Apple in my portfolio. What can I do now? Well, first of all, I had to buy these shares for a strike price of 300, invested $30,000. But remember, I also collected the premium from the short put. So essentially, my overall investment would have been $29,195 for the 100 shares. So actually, it was a bit lower. That was my effective entry price for this, because I collected this premium. But now that I own the Apple stock, 100 of Apple shares in my portfolio, I can then use the covered call strategy to generate income simply by owning the stock, based on what we had discussed last week. So if you are interested, check out the part on what are good ways to use the covered call strategy. And if you put these two things together, the combination of selling cash secured puts, you collect the premium, eventually you might get assigned, and once you get assigned, you start selling covered calls. This put together is what's called the wheel strategy, because it starts from scratch again eventually. This is how it can look like. Look at this. Here's an example. So we let's use Apple. We're selling cash secured puts, and let's say in the first time we do it, it will expire worthless. We're flat again. We get to keep the premium. Second time we do it, we're selling another cash secured put. It also expires worthless. We get to keep the premium. The third time we do it, now the trade didn't go in our favor. Apple stock, let's say, went down. We get assigned 100 shares of Apple. We are forced to buy 100 shares of Apple. Now we own Apple shares. Now we can now use the covered call strategy. So we can sell covered calls above the share price, collect the premium. For example, the first time we do it, it will expire worthless. The second time we do it, our shares will get called away. And guess what? At that point, we are flat again. So now we have a flat position, and we can now start once again selling cash secured puts. The whole cycle starts from the beginning again. This is what's called the wheel strategy. In a later session, I will expand a bit more which stocks are more primed to use this strategy on, and when you should start selling these cash secured puts or covered calls. Because not all the time it's a good moment to do it. This is a topic for another lunch and learn session. But I just wanted to show you how this wheel strategy can look like with the example of Apple.